All right, thank you so much, Kat. And now, just mentioned, I'm going to ask our friend Raquel to introduce our first speaker.
Yeah, my name is Raquel and I'm an alcoholic. I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and I'm very excited. I'm very excited because the inspiration for this meeting came actually from listening to speakers and just trying to, understand a little bit more the program. And to have our two speakers today that we have is for me really an honor, because they don't know that I used to go on walks and listen to them all the time, and I'm just so glad to have them. Our first speaker is Chad, and Chad, honest to God, has an uncanny ability to give the literature in pieces and to break his experience in such a beautiful way that for me it's always amazing to hear him. I understand them, and like Calvin says, he brings the book to life. So Chad, come in.
Hi guys, my name's Chad Payne. I'm an alcoholic. I was looking over this last night and I realized that I've got 50 minutes to talk about 6 steps. So I realized that wasn't enough time. So I've decided to use my time to talk about the recent presidential election and how I see the future of our country. I'm so glad I'm in a room full of people that can take a joke. I thought about saying that ahead of time, and then I was like, that could be really a bad idea. And I thought, the hell with it, we'll see what happens. I've been sober since April the 2nd of 2003, and that's interesting. I have 21 years now, and I feel like I'm kind of at that point. Julie and I are members of a home group in Asbury Park called Rule 62, and it's pretty new, and it attracts a lot of young people, a lot of people that are a lot cooler than me. Come to that group, and they point that out to me on a regular basis. And it's interesting because we're kind of moving into this role of elder statesman, and that's strange. That means you really have to watch how you act. And when you're around people and you're having the fun conversations that I love to have with my friends, sometimes I realize, man, maybe I'm the one that's supposed to bring this up a little, and maybe not set that kind of example. So that's a new thing for me, but it's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be here with some AA enthusiasts. I love you guys. I love people that are enthusiastic about the 12 steps, God, the big book, helping people, helping alcoholics. It's a great, Julie came with me. I'm so glad she's here with me, and we've been doing a little speaking together, and that's a lot of fun. There's good and bad to being in an AA couple. As my one of my mentors, Katie, would say, one alcoholic in a relationship is a lot. And we have 2 real alcoholics in our relationship, but we get to do AA together, and that's a gift. It's really cool. And then it's a big honor to be here with Chris, someone who I've listened to many times, and I really appreciate Chris paving the way for so many of us. So I'm going to get into this. I want to tell you, I'm not going to tell you a whole lot about my story for lack of time, and I've already used up a good chunk of it talking about nothing anyway. So I had my first surrender to alcohol a few years before I got sober, and what that looked like was I had a bad wreck. And it was not that one event. It was kind of like, I don't know, the culmination of a lot of events. I spent about a month in the hospital and had a bunch of broken bones, and I was on crutches for about 6 months when I got out, and I realized at that time that all my attempts to manage my drinking and manage my, and all the partying and all the stuff that I had been doing, really, it wasn't working, and the only clear solution was just to quit altogether. And that was a big surrender, to finally get to that point where it's like, okay, I obviously can't live this way, I can't control this, and I'm just going to have to quit. And I got out of the hospital after being in for about a month. And the reason that I understand today that I didn't understand then is that the reason that I just needed to quit, that it was going to have to be total abstinence. I didn't even know what the word meant at the time, but I learned that when I got to AA. But the reason that I was going to have to quit altogether is because whenever I would start to drink, I would lose control. And that was very obvious. And even I rarely went out to have a couple of beers. I mean, I would go out to get drunk, but still, I would think I'm going to get drunk and have a good time. And what kept happening is my good times kept turning bad. You know, so it didn't always look to me like I plan on having 2 and instead I have 22 or whatever. What it looked like for me a lot is I planned on having a good time, and once I start to drink, I lose control and bad things happen, and I find myself doing a lot of things that are way outside my value system. And at this time, I've got a lot of things to lose. I got a daughter at home who's wondering where Dad's been for the last month. You know, I wasn't the kind of drunk that stayed home. So in the hospital, recovering from this wreck with a broken hip and shoulder and jaw and busted up head and all these things, my big dysfunctional family full of alcoholism, they showed up. They showed up for me, and I remember looking people in the eye and saying, okay, I'm going to quit. I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to get sober and straighten up and go back to school and be a good father. And I worked construction on the road. I was going to quit doing that. I didn't really work a lot of construction on the road. I spent a lot of time on the road and hit a construction job here and there. That's kind of what it looked like. But I was going to quit all that and straighten up and certainly stay sober. That was the main thing. And I meant it. I really did mean it. You know. And when I got out of the hospital, I was on a walker, and it was really hard to get around on a walker because my shoulder was real messed up too. So I didn't really have. And my jaws were wired shut, so I was talking like this, you know, and sucking things through a straw, and it was just a mess. And they set the house up for me a little bit where I'd have a place to sleep in a recliner, and you know, got the high-powered blender so I could you know, blend cheeseburgers or whatever. They said you could blend anything. It's not true. It doesn't work. So all that's in place, and here we go off on this new life, and I last 2 days. It takes me 2 days to be, not just to take a drink, to stay out all night. Because that's what I did. I would leave and not come home. And that's when my wife took my daughter and left, and that began the days of quitting. And I quit drinking many, many times. And ended up homeless on crutches for 6 months. I was on crutches for 6 months, homeless with a serious drinking problem, and quitting every day. Not every day, but most days. Most days I would quit. I'm not going to do this anymore, and I would start back again, and that's kind of how it went. So when it comes to step 1. There's 2 things I really like to look at, and I call it the basics of step 1. And the first thing is I have an inability to control my drinking once I start. Very simple. Almost everybody gets that. The one that my head has a hard time grasping is that I don't have a choice over whether or not I pick up the first drink. Because what it looked like to me, let me put it this way. The craziest thing I ever did was after a period of sobriety, considering all the consequences that I had faced, all the consequences that I am facing, all the good reasons to stop, all the firm commitments, after all that, I pick up another drink, and that's insane. I do it stone cold sober. That's insane. But what's even crazier than that is I, just like that, convinced myself that I made the choice to do it. You know, and I'm fortunate to get to talk to people in institutions a lot, and the way that I lay it out for them is I ask them, how many of you have gone back to your loved ones and said, I'm sorry I picked up again? And they all raise their hands. And I tell them, I commend you for that, because I know what you tell them. You tell them you made the choice to pick up again, and you're taking personal responsibility for it, and I commend you for that. But what I'm telling you is, in reality, you're apologizing for the wrong thing. What you should be apologizing for, you should be saying to your loved ones, you know, I'm sorry I didn't make all my amends. You know, I'm sorry I didn't attend my home group on a regular basis. You know, I'm sorry I never wrote that 4th step. I'm sorry that I stalled out and didn't pick up any sponsees. You know, because that's what I do have power over. And if I'm not doing that, then the one that I picked up that I'm apologizing for that led to all the rest of that, I didn't have a choice, but it seemed like I had a choice. And that's what's so crazy about alcoholism, and that's what my mind really can't grasp. And that's one of the reasons, among many reasons, that's one of the reasons I need you. Because you guys remind me that left to my own devices on my own power, this thing will convince me to pick up another drink. And I'll think it's a reasonable choice at some point. But what I like to talk about a lot these days, because today I pick up more sponsees that are coming to me with years of sobriety and untreated alcoholism. I got a great email, 6 months, a year ago from a guy, and all it said was, "Hi, Chad. I'm sober 15 years. I'm getting a divorce. My kids won't speak to me, and I'm filing bankruptcy, and I want to die. Can you help me?" And I see that a lot. I get that a lot. Or I get someone that was in untreated alcoholism and then relapsed and has burned it down again and is now coming back. So what I like to talk about is current experience with step one. What's your current experience with step one after having been sober for a long time? And I have current experience with step one, 21 years removed from alcohol. And I really like to look at what that looks like. So I want to read just a couple lines out. So is it okay if I read a line or two out of the book? Are you sure? We're okay with that in here? We're talking about the big book, right? You guys know that? Okay. It says here, we learned we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. That's actually, for many of us, pretty easy to do coming in off a bad drunk. Sometimes it's hard to concede to my innermost self, fully concede to my innermost self that I'm alcoholic 21 years sober. That's a little tougher. And then it goes on to say this is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we are like other people, or presently may be, has to be smashed. And I've talked to people about this sentence and that know grammar better than me. And I've had people tell me that this sentence is grammatically incorrect. It doesn't need or presently may be. It could very easily say the delusion that we are like other people has to be smashed and have the exact same meaning. And to me, what's going on there is Bill is really trying to emphasize, I think this was divine inspiration in this book. I think he wrote this book with 3 years sober, and somehow he wrote it to people with 20 years of sobriety, along with people that were walking into AA and everywhere in between, because it's emphasizing this presently maybe the delusion that today I'm like other people has to be smashed. And that's a tough delusion to smash. You know why? Because my life looks normal today. I look normal today. Julie doesn't think I look normal today. But to most outsiders, because I practice the principles of this program pretty good, I like to say to the best of my ability, about 85%, He's a B plus on a good day. I look pretty normal, and I live a pretty normal life, and it is easy to forget. It's easy to forget that I'm alcoholic. And what it looks like is I can afford to carry a resentment, just like everybody else can. I can afford to carry a resentment about maybe during an election year. I can afford to carry a resentment based on this coworker that I have that did whatever. You know what I'm talking about. It looks like that I don't need to sit down and put pen to paper tonight because things aren't going that bad. It looks like I don't need to talk to my sponsor about that. I can probably handle that on my own, and I know what he's going to say anyway. Right? And I didn't like what he said about it last time, so I'm not going to talk to him about it this time. And all that it makes a lot of sense if you're normal. But if you're not, if you're an alcoholic whose life depends on those things, that's crazy. That's crazy. And one of the things I've heard quite a bit here recently is I've heard speakers or somebody, leading a meeting or whatever say, the only step that I've worked perfectly is step one. And I know what they mean. What they mean is I've made a lot of mistakes in my program and in sobriety, but I've stayed sober. But to me, what that illustrates is a real misunderstanding of step one. Step one doesn't say don't drink. Step one says, Chad, you can't not drink. So here's how you work step one perfectly. You work step one perfectly by never missing a nightly review, never missing prayer and meditation, not writing inventory on a resentment before you carry it around for an hour or two. That's what it looks like to work step one perfectly. And who does that? Nobody does that. I don't do that. I'm so grateful for the grace of God to carry those of us who don't do this perfectly through this, right? Because I certainly don't. But to me, that's kind of when we talk about this. Like for instance, the Big Book tells me it's easy. It says here it's easy. It's easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. That is so easy to do, because what happens when I practice an AA program, I get something called the gifts of sobriety. And when I get the gifts of sobriety, I can rest because I'm not hurting, right? And the way it's been explained to me, and it makes perfect sense to me because I watch it happen over and over, not only in my life, but in the lives of so many guys that I work with and so many people that I'm around, is the most dangerous thing we experience in AA are the gifts of sobriety. Because the gifts of sobriety, it's not that I get too busy to work an AA program, though that's part of it. But along with that, it's that something in me says, your life is normal now. You must be normal. So that's the conversation that I find myself having a lot, and that's what I really like to talk about in a room like this, because I think I'm in a room full of people who really get it. Physical allergy, mental obsession, spiritual malady, I can name that stuff and explain that to somebody right off, but it's often when we look at our own current experience with step one, guys, right now, 21 years sober, my head tells me, come on, Chad, you could drink one beer. You could get away with that. Or you know what it says even stronger than that? It says, Chad, you obviously can handle not drinking on your own power. And as long as I'm on the subject, you know what else it says? This is what my head says. It says, Chad, there's no God. For real? Are we going to do this again? So what I've got to realize in step one is that it's not just the alcohol problem, it's the mental problem that can cause me so much trouble, because I still can't listen to this guy on certain things. On some things I can. On choosing the best route to drive from the Jersey Shore to... No, that's even a lie. That was all GPS. There are certain things that I can listen to my head on, but there are certain things that are above its pay grade. And those are some of those things. And that's what my current experience with step one looks like today. To move into step two, the solution is still a spiritual experience. Still for me today, that's what the solution is. And I suffer from something that I was taught is called current agnosticism. The agnosticism that the book is talking about in the beginning of this chapter is about the guy who comes into AA and we explain alcoholism to him, and he's like, great, that's me, and we got a fellowship of people around you. Great, you're like me, you guys are happy, there's something working here. And then we say, yeah, it's a spiritual awakening, it's God. And the guy goes, oh no, that doesn't work for me. Either that doesn't work for me because I resent God. That doesn't work for me because I've already tried that. That doesn't work for me. Like in my case, you people really believe this nonsense? That's what I came in with. That's actually what I was thinking when I was like 9 years old sitting in church. I'm like, come on. You guys are grown-ups and you believe this stuff? I'm 9 and I know this is nonsense. I've always been way too smart for my own good. Smart's not the right word. It's intellectual, maybe? I don't know. Thinking I'm smart, something like that. So that's that's the solution for me when it comes to all areas of my life. So where is my current agnosticism? It's usually in those areas of my life where it's got to go a certain way. You know, do you have some of those areas where somebody's like, you brought God into this, and there's a voice in the back of your head saying, I'm not leaving this up to God, because it can't go this way. And God might go with that way. And we're not doing that. Right? So that's where a lot of that current agnosticism comes from. And then what that does is that drives me into self-will. And now I've got to handle this problem all by myself. I'll manage this one. Right? And what I understand today is that it's my birthright as a human being, as a child of God. I have access to God within me. I don't have to go anywhere or do any, special thing outside of me to find God. I have access within me, but I'm blocked. I'm blocked. There's something blocking me inside from accessing that power. And some of us, I think we go one of two routes. Some of us are completely living by what our emotions tell us to do. And some of us are neck up and we're completely living by what our thinking is telling us to do. And neither one of those are God. And for most of us, those things are messed up. They're not really quite right. I think they're not really quite right for most of the human race, maybe all of it. For alcoholics, really not quite right. Really not quite right. And that's what I'm trying to do, is access this power within me. So in step one, we find out that I have a fatal illness called alcoholism. In step two, we find out there is a solution, and it's a spiritual experience. And then in step three, which I, like many folks that I've talked to in AA, I thought step three was simply a decision and then a prayer. I'm going to decide to turn my will and my life over to God, and then I'm going to say a third step prayer that has a bunch of thee and thy and that kind of thing in it. Clearly outdated language. And say this prayer and then move on. But what I was missing was a really important part of the book, which was really, we read it and talked about this so much at the table with Charlie and Katie, and if you're interested in what's on pages 60 to 63 and the failure of self-will and how that affects us, especially in long-term sobriety, and you've never listened to Charlie and Katie talk about this, listen to them. They break it down in a way that makes it so easy to understand. And we would talk about what's on these pages, and I don't have much time to go through them, but what I do want to say is that what I find out in step three is that I can't have a spiritual experience, which is the only solution to alcoholism. I can't have a spiritual experience, and the reason I can't have one is because I'm blocked. And what blocks me is my efforts to live life on self-will. I can't experience God while I'm playing God. And the way I see this today is it's like, here's life all around me, and I have no relationship with life. What I have is a very sick relationship with the way I think life should be, and I'm obsessed with it. All I think about is how things should be and how I want things to be, and how if this can be this way, then it'll be fine. And in that sense, I'm like the actor trying to run the whole show. All I think about is how to arrange life in a way that suits me. And if I can't figure it out, then I argue about it with people who aren't in my vicinity. Does anyone in this room, does anybody in here feel like that you spend I hope somebody can relate to me on this. Does it feel like you spend an inordinate amount of your time preparing your argument? Oh, good. A couple hands go up. Great. I don't know what I'm preparing for, but I'm building my case all the time. Seems like there are better things to think about. The book says I'm a victim of the delusion that I can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if I just manage it well. What that means to me is if I just get everything I want, then I'll be okay. Ultimately, if I can just finally nail it all down and get everything I want, then I'll be okay. And guys, I am not talking about drinking. I mean, I tell you, I thought reading this stuff, and I believe it, on the first level of this is written to describe the drinking alcoholic. But the beautiful thing about the big book is there's another level and another level and another level. And I keep finding more and more levels to this. But my experience is that when I was drinking, I just really pretty much needed one thing. And everything else, I didn't really care. I didn't really care if the girl stayed or went. I didn't really care if I got fired or not. I didn't really care about so many things. As long as I could continue to drink the way I like to drink, it was fine. And then I got sober. And when I got sober, suddenly I took a deep interest in the details and the circumstances of my life. Turns out there are a lot of things that I need to be okay. I don't really care how any of you act unless you have a direct effect or maybe an indirect effect on my life, and then I'm very interested in how you act, you know? And I've become quite needy. You know, I need a lot. And what this is telling me is that this is all based on a delusion. That if I can get everything to be the way I want it to be, then I'll be okay. That's a delusion. And when I first realized that the book is telling me that's a delusion, my thoughts were, what are you talking about? The idea that if I can get everything to be the way I want it to be and then I'll be okay makes more sense to me than anything in the world. And you're telling me that's not even true? And if you think about it, it's really not. I mean, it can go two ways. The first way is I don't get it to be the way I want it to be, and then I can't be okay, and that's no way to live. The second way is I do get it to go my way, and I'm happy now for about 10 minutes, and then I need something else. And it's a never-ending long line of now I need this, now I need this, now I need this, and now I need this. And it's never enough. And I love it. I've got a sponsee. It was so perfect. I love this guy. And he called me up, and he was talking about struggles he was having with his wife, who is also in AA. And he said if she would just work an AA program, everything would be fine. And I was like, oh, buddy, write that down and date it. And it worked perfectly. About 3 months later, he called me upset about his wife, and you know what he said? He said, she's always talking to her sponsees. It's like, this is perfect. Do you hear this? You know. What is it that I need to be okay? It's always something. And what happens, all that really happens is the order of the list changes. But it's always something. Who's on the top of the list today? And really, guys, it's not that it's wrong or bad. All it is that I'm living life backwards. It's just backwards. What my mind says, what my belief system, my old idea says, is that if I can arrange this, I can fix this. And that's backwards. What AA's telling me is, Chad, focus on this. And all this out here, first you'll see it differently, and then it'll change. And that's the miracle of it. You know, I get it. Okay, I'll see it differently. Fine, I'll accept the idea that this sucks and this is no good and this. No, it actually changes. And I think a more religious way of looking at it is God saying, Chad, if you'll focus on your internal condition and growing closer to me, I'll make all this really amazing. My external circumstances are always going to be, in some form or fashion, a reflection of my internal condition. And that's another thing that my mind can't grasp. It can't grasp that. So if left to my mind, I'm not living that way. Left to my mind, I'm going to spend my entire life fixing you, then you, then you, and then I got to go back to you, and then, you know, and it's just a long uphill battle, and that's where I live. So the book tells me that the root of my troubles is selfishness and self-centeredness, that I live in a high state of stress. The word troubles means mental agitation, stress, or worry. Stress. We can all relate with stress, right? That's what we call it today, stress. What's the cause of my stress? This, that. No, that's not it. My troubles are of my own making. What causes my stress is I constantly am trying to arrange life to suit me, and it's either it ain't working or it is working, and I'm worn out. It's interesting, back here in the, I guess you'd call these the 11th step promises on page 88, it says, we do not tire so easily, for we are not burning up energy foolishly as we did when we were trying to arrange life to suit ourselves. The human brain is a small part of the human body. It's like 8% of the mass or 4% of the mass of the human body. It burns about 25% or 30% of the energy that the body consumes. Unless I'm living in self-will, because each thought requires energy. Now I think we're talking like 50%. Like it's burning a lot of energy, because when I'm in self-will, I'm doing a lot of thinking, and it's exhausting. So the book goes on to say, above everything, we alcoholics must stop drinking vodka. That's what Charlie said when he read it to me. It's like, that's not what it says, Charlie. And he goes, just making sure you're paying attention. He was making a point. He's trying to tell me it's not above everything is not sobriety. But here's what's interesting. I realized this years later. I would think, based on my knowledge of AA, that it should say, above everything, we alcoholics must develop a relationship with God. Above everything, we alcoholics must have a spiritual awakening. And that's not what it says. It says above everything. Think about that for a second. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid, which I looked it up. It means to get free of. So we alcoholics must get free of this selfishness. The selfishness we've been talking about. Chad trying to arrange life to suit him. That's the most important thing I've got to do as an alcoholic is stop it. Stop that. Live in this world. Don't manage this world. That's the number one thing I got to do. Really? Who shows up in AA and says, I've got a serious problem arranging life to suit me? Can you guys help me? But the way that I see this today is that, guys, I'm agnostic, to put it mildly. I mean, not today, but I came in agnostic just to put, atheist was a much better description of the kind. And I had an experience with a God I didn't believe in. How does that happen? And I continue to have an experience with a God still left to the power of my mind I still don't believe in. And I continue to have that. Here's how it happens. It's just a scale. As self-will goes down, God consciousness goes up. They can't both be up here. I can't be living in self-will and be conscious of the presence of God. And when self-will goes down, it automatically goes up. This program is not about what I do or don't believe in. It's about what I experience. And that's what I experience. I experience God as I lose selfishness. Bill said in his story, he said, a price had to be paid for a new relationship with my Creator. A price had to be paid. It meant destruction of self-centeredness. And that's what the rest of this program is all about. It tells me on page 63, it gives me this deal. It says, God provides what I need if I stay close to God and be of service. My job just got so much simpler. There it is. Stay close to God and help others. And God provides what I need. Now, I thought what I need was like enough money to live on. That's reasonable. Place to live, a relationship, a career. Nothing extravagant. I'm not asking for a boat. I'm just saying those are. What I didn't realize is that what I need is freedom from character defects. Freedom from character defects comes through difficulties in life, right? One of my favorite lines in the book says, avoid then the deliberate manufacture of misery, but if trouble comes, cheerfully capitalize it as an opportunity to demonstrate His omnipotence. What I understand today is that Spirit calls for freedom. Spirit in me calls for freedom. And sometimes it pulls situations or people into my life that give me the opportunity to get free of some of the stuff that blocks me. I call these things problems, but in the world of the Spirit, they're opportunities. So we move on. I'm going to get through these steps here. Vigorous course of action. This course of action is about getting close to God through getting free of the blockages. We write a 3-part inventory, which are all common manifestations of self, which means manifestations of self that we all have in common. What are the results of living a life on the basis of self-will? Resentments and fear. And you know where else I show up pretty selfishly? In relationships. So let's just go ahead and throw that in. We'll write on that one too. The flow of this resentment inventory, the process of looking at this stuff from a different angle. Who is it that caused the problem? What did they do? And now we're breaking new ground. Now we're going to go within. What is it in me that's so highly affected by this? Why is it that when it rains out here, you're happy and I'm mad? What is it in me that's affected? And then there's this beautiful piece, this realization where I realize that the person who offended me is perhaps spiritually sick. And you know what? They're a lot like me. I might not have done the same thing they did, but I'm capable of doing things that hurt people when I'm trying to get what I need to be okay. And maybe I'm taking something personally that's really not about me. And then we get to one of the greatest miracles of this program, the 4th column. The 4th column, where I began to take responsibility for the problems in my life. And this is so beautiful because it's the last thing I want to do. The last thing I want to do is look at how I showed up in this beef. Do we say that up here? It's a beef? We do? Okay, good. Good. Yeah. And we've just talked about this the other night at Primary Purpose Group, how Mark Houston would say, and I'm sure he may not be the first one that said it, but he's the first one I heard say it. He would say the 4th column turns the 2nd column into a lie. And what that means to me is this, and I'll use Julie and I as an example. Julie and I have had an argument in front of our friends, our new friends, the cool people, at a restaurant. It wasn't real bad. I mean, we've had arguments now, let me tell you. We've been together almost 12 years, and that's cool, right? We're in round 3. We've had some rough times. We used to fight. There was some real fighting. This one was not bad at all. And I spent a couple of days resentful about this. Oh, I just realized you might not like me telling this story. Julie's great. She has a great AA program. It helps a lot of people. Okay, here we go. I love you. I spent about 2 days waiting for her to come to me and take responsibility and to clean it up. She didn't do it. And I was convinced once again that if she would come to me and take responsibility and clean it up, that I'd be free. And after a couple days, I wrote the inventory and I read it to my sponsor, who is never very nice to me. It's a man named Jimmy A. out of New Jersey. Do any of you guys know him? Yeah, he's not very nice. Great AA. Great AA. A lot of respect for him. I read it to him, and then I went to Julie and I made my amends. And I forgot about it. I forgot about the whole thing. And that happens for me over and over. My head tells me that the reason I have a resentment is column 2, and what I find over and over is that the reason I have a resentment is column 4. If there was no column 4, there was only a column 2, 9 times out of 10, I don't have a resentment. I forget about it. And Charlie would say, the miracle of the resentment inventory is that I go in with the resentment, trying to learn how to forgive the person, and I come out with an amends. That's the miracle. Because that, if my troubles are my own making, that means I can get free. We have a fear inventory, and the book tells me I'm driven by 100 forms of fear. When I'm living on the basis of self-will, I'm driven by 100 forms of fear: self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. I don't decide where I'm going. Fear does. It runs through everything in me. If I've got a spiritual malady, I have fear. They go hand in hand. If I have any sense that things are not okay, well, then I'm afraid that they're not going to be okay. And then I have a delusion. The delusion says, if, fill in the blank, then it'll be okay. Then I get into self-seeking. Let's figure it out. I'm either going to think about it, take some action, we're going to change this. And then the self-pity comes in, where either I didn't get what I wanted and it sucks again, or I did get what I want and I'm still not okay, and now I'm back in self-pity. And that drives me back into the fear, and I live in that cycle. And I love how the book in the fear inventory talks about living on a new basis. So what we do, the way that we do it in my little crew, is that we write this fear inventory. Right? What is the fear? Then why do I have it? What are the belief systems? What is it that I must believe about me, you, God, in order to have this fear? And then we also like to look at how self-reliance has shown up based on this fear. How have I been acting because I'm in this fear? And that's really another miracle, is to have the awareness, this is how I act when I'm scared. And really all that's happening is all it is I have fear in me. That's it. My mind's found a place to put it. Now it's this, now it's that, now it's that. And what I find over and over is that it really doesn't even matter what I write the fear inventory on. What it really comes back to is, Chad, you have fear living inside you. And when you do the work to release that fear, then these other things just fade away. So it says there's a better way, from now on a different basis. So just a couple of pages ago, it tells me I'm living on the basis of self-will. And now I'm living on the basis of trusting and relying upon God. And that's the solution to fear. We outgrow fear. It says we outgrow fear as we felt new power flow in, as we enjoyed peace of mind, discovered we could face life successfully. And then here's the part: as we became conscious of God's presence, we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, the hereafter. So as I release, let go of living a life on the basis of self-will, God consciousness goes up, and guess what fades away? Fear. Fear. So, when I call my sponsor and say, I'm really scared about this or that, and he says, so where are you at in your amends? I'm like, what's that got to do with it? Didn't you hear me? It's got everything to do with it. So how many guys you sponsoring? I'm not talking about sponsees. I'm talking about I'm scared she's going to leave me. And he says, I asked you, where are you at in your amends? How many guys are you sponsoring? Because if I'm not current on amends, if I'm not sponsoring guys and other things, praying and meditating and so on, then I don't have God consciousness, and fear is just looking for an outlet. It's going to be about the job or about the kids or about the relationship or whatever. It says many of us need an overhauling there in the sex inventory. I'm part of many. Not all of us. Some of you in here have done pretty good in relationships and sobriety. And I love you, and I'm glad you're in AA because we need you. Then there's the rest of us, where relationships are the final frontier and it's a big old train wreck. Thank God we have this inventory process to get through this. A sane and sound ideal is what we developed through doing this inventory. And I have a current sane and sound ideal right now. And I'll just give you a couple ideas. I'll tell you the truth up here. I'll give you a couple of ideas of some things that are on that sane and sound ideal. They're things like, it is not beneficial to our relationship if I use passive-aggressive comments to try to get Julie to straighten up. That's a current sane and sound ideal for me. I don't have a sane and sound ideal right now that tells me how to date and what kind of relationship I'm looking for. I have a current sane and sound ideal. I won't tell you the rest of what's on it, but there's more than that. But it's all about how I need to show up in this relationship based on inventory that I've written. I'm not going to get into these pages because I already got the 5-minute notifier about 2 minutes ago, but page 73 in our big book talks about secrets, living a double life, and stage characters. And that's another part of the book that has deep, profound meaning to me years into sobriety. What kind of double life am I living today? You know, is there a difference in the opinion of those who see me at home, at work, in AA? Do I show up there differently? Or, more than that, what's that thing I'm doing that I ain't telling anybody about? And there's somebody in this room that's doing something right now that's against your values, and you're not telling anybody about it because you know if you tell somebody about it, you're going to have to stop it. And what happened for me is I was engaged in some behavior like that just a few years ago, and it was not good. It was very dishonest. And I would have gotten an A+ on my AA program based on what everybody saw. And I'm talking about all of it. You know, the 10th step, 11th step, writing inventory, sponsoring guys, carrying the message, involved in AA, all that stuff. Except there was one thing I wouldn't bring into any of that. And it was a big deal. And I had a sponsee say, so let me ask you this, Chad. Do you think because you're Mr. AA and you're sponsoring all these guys and you have a consistent practice of steps 10 and 11 and you're involved in AA that you're immune to drinking? And I was like, yeah, I do think that. Thank you for telling me that. I realize I'm in big trouble. And I got in a process where I came clean on that deal. And really, all I was going to do was keep doing it until I got enough information to figure out what to do next. And you know what? That was never going to happen. There was never going to be enough information. So we come into step 6, the last step I have here to cover in my remaining 25 minutes. A couple things I just want to say real quick about it, and then I'm going to get down from here. I'll come in with some things that are objectionable. I'm now about to take the 3rd step with real awareness. Awareness of how self-will shows up in me. You know what character defects are? They're tools. They're tools that I use to manage my life. That's all. That's what they are. And they become objectionable. A real simple one is lying. That's how I get out of trouble. Kind of need it. But it's kind of messing up my new, relationships in AA. So I can't, but you know what though? I really don't want to quit lying. I just want to manage it. It says here, are we now ready to let God remove from us all things which we have admitted are objectionable? Yes, you can have them, God. Can he now take them all, everyone? I said yes, you can have them. Jeez. If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. Why would I take it? I don't want it. That's a lie. I do want it. I just want to manage it. I want to use it when I need it and not suffer the consequences. And that's why you got a character defect that just won't go away. It's probably because you're still trying to manage it. And you know what happens then? Then I surrender it. I finally reach a point where I'm like, fine, it's done. I don't want it. God, and then I find out I can't stop. I'm powerless. I'm powerless over these defects. And what that tells me is now I've got a serious piece of business with God. Everybody wants their life to change, and nobody wants to change. And the only way my life can change is if I change. The only way, and we're in such a wonderful position to be drunks that get to show up in AA and live a new life, because most people my age don't change. And I get to change every day thanks to you in this program. So thanks for having me.
And I'm going to bring back Raquel now to introduce our next speaker.
Hello, everybody. My name is Raquel, and I'm an alcoholic. And, we're in for a treat right now because we have Chris S. Talking about the rest of the steps. And he is a great, great teacher. We are full of great teachers here in AA. And I can't wait to hear Chris. Chris, please.
Hey, everybody. My name's Chris. I'm an alcoholic. It's really, really good to be here. Raquel, thank you for asking us. It's really great to do this with Chad. Chad and I were really inspired by a group of people, the same group of people that were transformational motivators, and they led you through these amazing experiences with the spiritual work of Alcoholics Anonymous. And, so we're really from the same lineage of people. So it's really great to be doing this with him. So let's say step 6, I become willing to have these defects of character removed because I've found them objectionable. If I've paid attention to the work, if I've paid attention to the information in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, I see all this stuff as self-defeating. I see all this stuff as contributing to the causes and conditions of my alcoholism. So logically, I want to be rid of the things that are going to cause my own destruction. But there's a process, because I don't become perfect overnight. Hell, I don't become perfect ever. You know what I mean? So a lot of times I recognize this stuff before there's movement, before I'm better from all this stuff. So there's a lot of prayer work. There's a lot of prayer, like God, please make me willing, God. And then I move into step 7, which is humbly asking God to remove these defects of character. Now, my first time through the steps is always going to be different than current experience. My first time through the steps, there was, I wasn't really sure that all this stuff was going to work on me, because I've got, my case is not a normal case of alcoholism. I'm not a run-of-the-mill, alcoholic. I've got issues. I've got a dark, complicated personality. And, I suffer the injustices of the world on a level that most of you wouldn't be able to understand. And, I was like that guy. So this stuff just looked too simple for me. So today I understand it. My current experience with this step is 6 and 7 are so much. There's so much. Becoming willing. I have to have the willingness. And then humbly asking the power. And I had to get to a point where I truly believed that the power can move me. I mean, I'd had examples galore going through the steps, my experience in Alcoholics Anonymous, all this amazing stuff is happening, but I have to really, really believe that it's the divine. It's the divine. And the way the step is written, you say the 7-step prayer, and then it says, we have now completed step 7, period, end of sentence. Like, can that really be true? Can that really be true? Today, I really do. I believe it's true. There's 2 things about step 7 that's true. One of them is you can do it in about 5 minutes. And the other thing is it's going to take you the rest of your life. And both of those things are true. Now here's the thing. Why do I go to God? Why do I go to God with this stuff? Can I get self-help books? Is anybody in here, when you got sober, you had like a collection of self-help books? Wasn't that futile? You know what I mean? I had so many self-help books. I'm sober maybe 6 months, and my sponsor just shows up at my house for some reason. He'd never just showed up at my house before. I was wondering if I was in trouble, but he was just coming over to talk to me about something. And I invited him up to my room, and I've always had a lot of books. And he's looking through these books, And he's going, "Wow, Chris, you got a lot of self-help books here." And I'm like, yeah, Phil, yeah, I'm kind of proud. I got a lot of them, yeah. He goes, "Can I ask you a question?" I go, "Sure." He goes, "Can you tell me where your help others books are?" And I'm like, oh my God, that's the problem. I'm trying to treat the problem with the problem. Self, I'm trying to improve self. It never worked. I had every book, and I was just getting worse. So why do I go to God with this stuff? Because there's nothing else. That's what I've realized in Alcoholics Anonymous. There's nothing else. I have identified this condition. I truly believe that Bill Wilson saw self as a condition that needs to be recovered from. And how he realized that at 3.5 years or whatever he was when he wrote that book, I'm just coming to that conclusion decades later, right? But self is the condition that needs to be recovered from, to gain release from alcohol. So I go to God with this stuff, and I humbly ask, and then I have to be okay with what happens after, because I'm not in charge of the results. I'm in charge of the footwork. You know what I mean? I'm supposed to take these steps. What happens after that, as long as I continue to try to live a spiritual life, what happens after that is it's none of my business. You know what I mean? In step 3, I've made a decision that my life is not going to be my business anymore. It's going to be God's business. So I say this prayer. I'm in the right spiritual place, environment for this step. And then immediately I'm moved in to step 8, which is to make a list and become willing to make amends to the people and the institutions that I've harmed. And this is what I've found. I've found that my participation in step 8 and step 9 is my contribution to the removal of these character defects. There's a great line in the 12 and 12 that says, "God will not render us white as snow without our cooperation." So my cooperation is with these steps. And I believe the best possible spiritual environment for the removal of specific character defects, for God to be able to remove specific defects of character, is to be making amends to the people and the institutions that those character defects have hurt. I tell a story that I think illustrates this really well. I'm sponsoring this guy, and he was a rough dude, man. He did not have the kind of upbringing I had. I mean, he was on the streets, and it was brutal, his life. But he ended up in our home group somehow, and I ended up sponsoring him. And we're going through the steps together. We're going through step 4, and he's doing his job. He's doing his job. Perfectly? No, but he's doing his job. He's doing the best I think he can. And we're going to a meeting together. And we stop at a convenience store to get a cup of coffee because we knew who the coffee maker was. And so we stop and we get a cup of coffee. And as we're walking out of this convenience store, he does this. Really, I see him really quick, grabs a pack of cigarettes as we're walking out the door. There's like a display up front. And, I catch it, and we're outside. I go, whoa. Did you just steal a pack of cigarettes? And he goes, no. I go, let me rephrase that. Did you take a pack of cigarettes and not pay for them? Yeah. I go, well, what's that all about? You stole the cigarettes. No, it was from the display up front. I go, what does that have to do with it? He goes, you're a chump if you don't take that stuff. They budget for it. And I'm like, oh, time out, sponsorship summit. And we had the discussion, right? And what he did was he was willing to do his job in Alcoholics Anonymous. And what he did was he put a list of all the stores that he could remember ever stealing at. He was doing pretty good at that time. He had a construction business. He had money. So he put all these envelopes together, and he went back to every single store, and he asked to speak to the manager. And he was like, I'm here to make right or wrong. He did his thing. And he got done all of those, and a lot of times tried to give the money, and a lot of times was able to give the money. And the question I would just ask after telling that story is, do you think he steals cigarettes anymore? Not a chance, right? So I believe that we can participate in this stuff, but I believe ultimately the prime mover of these character defects is the divine. Now, I've got to be honest with you. There's not a lot of like ninth step amends that I'm current with today. Like I did a million amends. Old school teachers, ex-wives, ex-bosses. Places that I owed money. A ton of them. I did a ton of them. But today next month I'm going to celebrate 35 years sober, and I've been paying attention. Don't clap yet, don't clap yet. I've been paying attention to this spiritual work for a long time, and I can clean a lot of stuff up with 10. So, but I've got experience with step 9. I've got experience taking people through these steps. And what I would caution people to is if it's your first time through the amends steps, please find someone who has deep experience with amends and work with them on this. How basically I work with my guys is I have them put amends cards together. On the card is who it was, what the wrong was, how do you contact them. And then I meet with them, and on the back of the card, basically I go over the approach and what an amends would look like, what an appropriate amends would look like, because we can really screw this stuff up. I've seen a lot of people make amends that they needed to make amends for. You know what I mean? And I'll tell one quick story. I was working with this guy, and he was really anxious to move through all this stuff, and we did a 4-step, and he did his 5th step with me, and I made the appointment. I told him what he needed to do and what he needed to have ready for me the next time we met. And he went right home and made direct amends to his wife. And this is what he did. He goes to his wife and he says, honey, I've got to be honest with you. I've had 3 affairs with women at work. Okay, what happened next was not good. She beat the crap out of him. He almost lost an eye. I mean, she was kicking his head while he was on the ground. I mean, it was not good. And he comes back to me, and he's got some not good things to say about this step 9, and I'm like, dude, what are you doing? What are you doing? Do you know how worse you made everything? So that's just like one example of how we can really screw this thing up. There's appropriate ways to cover information up to a point. When it revolves around something like that. So Chad was talking about blocks. I'm blocked off from the consciousness of the presence of God. And that really is my big problem, because with the consciousness of the presence of God, nothing really is a problem. It's a situation or it's an experience or whatever. Self manufactures a problem. So what I thought when I was coming to you was that problems were coming at me. You know, it's a hostile universe, and you got to dodge and weave, and you got to not let people get over on you, and and all this stuff. That's really what I thought. And today I know that my problems aren't coming at me; they're coming from me. I manufacture them. I designate them as such. That's a problem. I've just designated it a problem. So these blocks, things like this that block me off from what I would basically just describe to you as the comfort of the divine. That's really what a fit spiritual condition is. It's a comfort of the divine. So these first 9 steps are like spiritual boot camp. Okay, think about boot camp in the Army. They take 90 days and they put you through unbelievable stressful situations. You're crawling through mud and you're learning how to shoot guns and you're learning how to self-defense, and you got to march until you can't march anymore, and you got to make your bed, and you got to do all this stuff. And when basic training is over, you are now fit for really, really trying situations. You're what they would consider fit for these extreme situations that you might encounter in war or whatever. I see the first 9 steps kind of in the same way. They've been like a spiritual boot camp. I've learned the tools that I'm going to need to use for the rest of my life to stay safe. To stay safe from this merciless obsession to put alcohol in my body. And then there's step 10. And step 10, I see it like this. I see that I must be mindful. I must be mindful for manifestations of self. I need to stay awake to when these things crop up. When I owe an amends, when I'm resentful. The basics that I've learned in the first 9 steps, I need to stay awake to it, because we can fall asleep. We can fall asleep with this stuff. It's easy to let up on this course of action and rest on our laurels. Many of us do that. I would say most of us have periods of time where they do that. And a lot of times it's the grace of God that protects us. A lot of times we've gone too far, and we pick up alcohol again. So in step 10, I have to stay mindful. I have to stay mindful of these manifestations of self. And there's practices, and there's prayers, and there's instructions. Make amends at once. Ask God for help. All the things that I've basically been taught in the first 9 steps. And then I look at step 11. I've been fit to live a spiritual life. So upon awakening, I need to think about the day ahead. And I need to ask God for help, but I also have to understand, what my job is going to be that day. What's going to be expected of me. And it's a very productive spiritual exercise. It's very, very productive. how I lived when I was drinking was I would come to wearing the clothes I passed out in the night before. I'd rush into the bathroom and throw some water on my face, do some vomiting calisthenics, go out to my $100 car and go off to my terrible job just, wishing I was dead. That's not a great way to start the day. So I take about 45 minutes in the morning. I take about 45 minutes in the morning to do this constructive, meditative practice to prepare for the day. And, I can't imagine not doing it today. I can't imagine just rushing out of the house. It just doesn't work for me. Something goes wrong if that happens. There's retiring at night. This is another deep self-examination piece where I review the day. I review everything that went on, especially any kind of inner disturbances, anything that I didn't feel right about, and I ask myself, do I need to talk to somebody about it? Do I need to, make amends? And I'm always thanking God. I am always thanking God for this experience that I have today on this planet. Because statistically, I should be dead. As an alcoholic, statistically, I should be dead. So I'm incredibly grateful. I'm incredibly grateful for this stuff. I'm going to share 3 practices that my current sponsor has me doing, and you can pull them out of the big book if you're real creative. But I found these to be incredibly impactful in my life, and they're unbelievably simple. Listen, the spiritual life is a simple life. The spiritual life has economy. I'm the one, my sense of self is what wants to complicate this stuff. I remember I'm in year 2 in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm buying the Course in Miracles, and I'm going through. You ever go through the Course in Miracles? It's like 5,000 pages, and it's got an exercise a day that you can't understand, and you're never going to be able to do. And I'm going through the Course in Miracles. No, I'm not. I'm just confused like a sumbitch. The spiritual life is a life of economy. So these are the 3 things that my sponsor has asked me to do on a regular basis. Chris, tell yourself what you're doing. What do you mean by that? Well, when you're doing something, tell yourself you're doing it. Tell myself I'm doing it. Yeah, tell yourself you're doing it. And then, Chris, always ask God for help before you do something. You want me to ask God for help, like before I drive to the store? Yeah. Always ask God for help. And the last thing I want you to do is when you walk outside, I want you to look up. You want me to look up? Yeah, I want you to look up. So think about this. I tell myself what I'm doing, I ask God for help, and I look up. It's pretty easy to remember, right? Let me tell you what my experience is with this stuff. When I tell myself what I'm doing, I'm in the now. I'm in the present. As an alcoholic, I've got a mind that stretches back to the dark past and pushes forward to the scary future. That's just the way my head works. If I'm not pissed off about somebody that did something to me 10 years ago, I got to go to work tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be bad. I caught the boss's van on fire. He's going to be mad. He's going to yell at me. And, if he yells at me, I'm going to have to hit him. And if I hit him, he's going to fire me if I hit him. And then I'm going to have no money. I'm going to have no money. That's like that. So tell yourself what you're doing. This is what I'm doing. So I'm in the now. I'm in the present. The holy now. When I ask God for help, what I'm doing is I'm conscious of the presence of God. I'm reminding myself to consciously be aware of the divine, and that's really productive. And when I go outside and I look up, that's my gratitude, because I look around, and this is one hell of a beautiful world, folks, that we've been planted on. You know what I mean? I truly believe this today. I believe that God made this world for us as a playground. We are his children, and he put this world together as our playground. And you remember when you were in like second or third grade and you were out on recess and you were learning how to, play together with the other kids, and, they taught you not to hit or steal, the other kids' toys. I mean, just learning how to be a good kid, And my experience today on this planet is I've been offered the opportunity to learn how to be a good person, in this spiritual world. That's possible, and I see it as a giant playground, and it's God's cathedral, and I'm unbelievably grateful to be here today. I was seriously contemplating suicide the last 5 years of my drinking, because of the burden of self, because the torture of the emotional damage of alcoholism. Nobody can suffer like us. Nobody can suffer like us. To be able to escape that suffering gives me an enormous amount of gratitude. Now I want to talk about step 12. I don't know anybody that can really do their job in the first 11 steps and not be moved into step 12. It's an organic pull to start to want to work with other people and try to be helpful. It's an organic pull. It's a shift. Chad had a great way of describing, as self goes down, God consciousness goes up. And, the way I see it is the same way. As my selfishness and self-centeredness starts to dissipate, I start to be more charitable and compassionate and service-oriented. And this happened organically. It wasn't like I read, a Daryl Carmichael book or something. You know what I mean? It happened. It happened, despite me. That all of a sudden I'm helpful. These steps don't render me perfect; they render me useful. And how that looked in my life, how that looks in my life today, is much of my waking moments have a great deal to do with helping other people. A great deal. What my life looked like prior to Alcoholics Anonymous was I'd stagger out to my car. I was a bad electrician. I'd go to work. I'd start something on fire, get in a bunch of trouble. It'd be quitting time. I'd head to the liquor store. I'd get a bottle of vodka or a bottle of bourbon. I'd head home, and the second I walked in the door, I had these big, 64-ounce glasses, put some ice in there, pour half a bottle of bourbon, and I'd start drinking and leave me alone, all right? I'd turn the phone off. I don't want to open the mail. Don't come over my house and ask me to help you move or something, you know what I mean? I'm drinking, and I would drink myself into unconsciousness, pass out, and wake up the next day, ready to go off to work again and blow something else up. That is the most selfish kind of life, and I would tell myself, I'm not hurting anybody but myself, No, I've taken myself off the playing field. I can't be where I need to be, doing what I need to be doing. I can't. I've selfishly taken myself off the playing field. And I went from that to someone that's eminently useful, working with sponsees. But it's not just that. It's in my entire life. There's like a service structure in my life. Now, I want to say this about sponsorship, because I think there's room for improvement today in in sponsorship in Alcoholics Anonymous. I really do. I think the chapter working with others is essential for a deep understanding of that chapter to really be able to sponsor, because in that chapter it details how we are to meet and approach an alcoholic, how we are to explain the first step to them, how we are to explain the solution to alcoholism to them, and how we are to explain the 12 steps and what they're all about, and how we are to help those individuals go through the 12 steps and actually take the 12 steps as a sponsorship imperative. So I've been doing that a long time. Here's my experience with sponsoring. I got sober in the late 80s, so it was just a little different. In my area, it was a little different. If you were a good sponsor, you would give somebody your phone number and pay attention to their consistency at AA meetings. That's what a good sponsor was. And a great sponsor was someone who would give you their phone number, pay attention to your consistency at AA meetings, and try to get you involved in some kind of service, coffee making, whatever. That was a great sponsor when I got sober. And so when I went through the 12 steps, I did it through a series of tapes because I didn't have a sponsor with working experience with the 12 steps at that time. I was actually inspired by, some of the people Chad and I knew, and I went through the steps from a workshop. But I continued to sponsor like I was sponsored. Here's my phone number. Give me a call if you get in a jackpot. These are the meetings I go to. I'd like to see you at meetings, and we'll see about open service commitments for you. And my experience with that was some of these guys were drinking on me. You ever have a sponsee drink on you? Make you look bad? Is Harry yours? Do you know he's hitting on the new women? He's borrowing money. I think he stole a car. Yeah, Harry's mine, I'll talk to him. I was under the illusion that a sponsor was part drama coach, part life manager. And and here's the mistake I was making. I was trying to help people manage unmanageable lives. You understand? Like the book, the chapter Working with Others, what it does is it tells you to take them through the 12 steps so that they can get to the power, the real power. You're not the power. To get to the real power where there's transformational change in their lives, where they can recover from alcoholism and be about the business of a really purposeful life. That's my job. And so somebody will come up to me and say, oh, they're coming over my house, they got guns, and you wouldn't believe this, all this crazy stuff. What do you want me to do? Well, I think it's time for an inventory. You know what I mean? I'm like that guy, like, what? I need weapons. You're talking to me about writing on paper? Do you want me to explain my situation slower? It's hard to understand. It's hard to understand, but we point somebody to the solution. We don't give you an answer to every problem you have. We give you something better than that. We give you a solution to all of it. And all of that is the spiritual life. And it's not a theory, we live it. We've got to live this spiritual life. And none of us are going to do it perfectly. We're all going to fall short every single day in word, thought, and deed. We are. I think what keeps us safe and protected is just continually to go back to the source, to continually go back to the principles, continually go back to thing called recovery and the spiritual experience that we get from this work. I'm gonna read a couple of things, and I know this is a big book meeting, but what I'm gonna read is two short passages from the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. I am first gonna read a real good example of what we're up against. And this is buried in Tradition 9 on 174 of the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. It says, unless each AA member follows to the best of their ability our suggested 12 steps to recovery, they almost certainly sign their own death warrant. Do you think he means death warrant? Listen, folks, we're given a daily reprieve based on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. You know what a reprieve is? You're on death row and you get a reprieve. You know what that is? That's like, okay, they're not going to kill you that day. You know, that's what we get. If you don't understand you're on death row as an alcoholic with a reprieve, you need to do some step one work. You know what I mean? So his drunkenness and disillusion are not penalties inflicted by people in authority. They result from his personal disobedience to spiritual principles. So folks, when we relapse, we want to make it about something. She left, or I lost my job, or it's raining, or whatever. This tells us exactly why we drink. We drink because we are disobedient to these spiritual principles that we find in the 12 steps. And I found that through my own personal experience and my experience working with others to be absolutely true. So that's the bad news. The good news is this: AA's 12 steps are a group of principles, spiritual in their nature, which, if practiced as a way of life, can expel the obsession to drink and enable the sufferer to become happily and usefully whole. So if I practice these group of principles as a way of life, I am going to be released from the obsession to put alcohol back in my body, which is why I came to you in the first place. But there's a bonus to that. I'm going to be happily and usefully whole with a W. You know, the whole package is going to be good. And I got to tell you, folks, that's the best deal you can ever imagine getting. You know what I mean? It's the best deal you can ever imagine getting. I haven't been paying attention. Am I getting close? 2 minutes. All right. With my 2 minutes, I just want to thank everybody for showing up here. The people that show up to things like this are the enthusiasts. You know, you're the Alcoholics Anonymous enthusiast. I'm not worried about you. I'm worried about the people who didn't come. You understand what I'm saying? So a lot of times what we do is we take something like this as like a pep rally. And we go back, we've got a shot in the arm, a spiritual shot in the arm, and we go back and with renewed enthusiasm, you know, to our meetings and to our sponsees and to the people that we try to carry the message to. And I would just ask everybody to please be conscious of that. It's through helping other people that we truly are helped ourselves. Anyway, thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much, Chris. Moving for sure. Thank you.